Why is it important to understand what you truly want? And when you actually do the vision process, not just a lot, it's actually an emotional process. Uh, I take my clients towards what really matters to them. And you might want all sorts of weird things like, oh, I want a car, I want a house. That's not what happens in a vision. I want you to think more specifically around who you want to become as a person. What kind of person do you see yourself? What is an ideal version of yourself? Everybody has that aspiration. So if you're listening to this, ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? If you don't know what that is, who inspires you? In your life.
Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the Share the Wealth Show. This is the show where we discuss strategies on how to build, grow, and protect minority wealth. And today I'm super excited to have my guest on, Faisal Ensaun. And he is somebody I just happened to message on Facebook, and it turned into a good conversation where I ended up saying, "Hey, I think it would be great to have you on the show, because you have so much value that you can add to the listeners out there and to myself as well, especially once I delve into his bio a little bit more." But Faisal, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here. I'm happy to be here.
Nice. Okay. So, at least from my bio, the bio that you provided, I know a little bit about your journey. Do you want to recap that really quick for anyone who does not know who you are?
So at this point, I'm a business owner and I'm a high performance coach, which to a lot of people that doesn't mean anything. But what I help people with is with their mindset, performance. And I'm also a business coach, and I've been an entrepreneur for the past decade, which is weird to say because I still remember it like when I started, like it was yesterday. And the journey was challenging. And I'm also a father, a husband, a father of two. There's one on the way, so there'll be three. And we are actually right in the middle of a move. We're moving literally into our motorhome. We're going to be heading down to Florida from Canada, and we're going to be nomads for the next little while as well. So we're going to be out of here right after Christmas. And so we're going to be between the two sides. We're going to be between Canada and US because we have family and friends on both sides.
Mhm.
And I love being in nature. I love exposing my kids to different places, different experiences, getting them outside of their comfort zone. My wife is a coach as well, but she's with the kids most of the time, and she does homeschooling for them too, but she also works with clients. And we jumped into this entrepreneurial path because we were looking for freedom internally for wanting to be who we are and live our life in the way that mattered to us, and actually explore the things that matter to us, grow in the way that we wanted to grow. And then externally, of course, we wanted time freedom and location freedom. And we wanted to inspire other people around us in our communities, because most people just have that one way of living. And we wanted to see if we can model something different. And because, to be honest, we were miserable with the life that we had before. And pretty much everybody we know, they're not really happy with the life that they have. And they didn't have a way forward. And we did a lot to figure out what might be a way that's different and that might give you a path forward towards your growth, spirituality, wealth, but also a way that will help others to kind of, they don't have to do exactly as we do, but at least they know that there are different approaches, especially in the world that we live in. There are so many opportunities.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. And especially that part where a lot of people aren't happy with where they are in life right now and what they're going through, just like their day-to-day activities, but they don't see that way out. And that's why I'm excited to have you here, because I'm hoping that, you'll discuss some like little tips or strategies, at least to take that first step for people in trying to find that answer, find that purpose, find whatever that next step that they need to take. And I know that next step won't be the answer, but that leads you in momentum and having motion and just being active. doing anything, it just opens up more doors than if you're static and you're not even searching or trying to find whatever the thing is for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, especially for those who come from a background where wealth was not a thing. And I know that's part of your story as well. I mean, I come from Bangladesh. We came from a war-torn country, and my parents literally had to flee with their clothes on their back, go to the neighboring country where they didn't know how to operate. And it wasn't like going from Mexico to US, as much as that's a big debate. It was
Yeah,
going Because imagine going from one really difficult place to live to another very difficult place to live,
yeah,
in the sense that they were in another third world country where they weren't accepted and they had to find a way. In fact, it wasn't just about making a living. It was actually not a safe place to be. And my parents were always afraid that my sisters would be kidnapped in that space. They were afraid that we would be kidnapped. Now imagine living in a place where you're not legal, you don't know how to make a living, and you are always thinking that somebody's going to harm your family. It was difficult, and most of their life they just did enough for us to survive, and that's the world that I grew up in. I grew up in a world of survival. We had enough they developed enough for us to eat, and we got a little bit more comfortable as we lived that way, but we were still poor. And in fact, everybody was poor there, so nobody knew the difference between poor and rich, to be honest. But when years later, when I came over to Canada, it's a different world.
yeah,
People on the Western Hemisphere, they don't realize how different it is. When I came here, I remember the first time I walked into a mall, I'm like, how is this possible? I didn't know what the hell a mall was. How is this possible? It's like so much material, so many material things, resources, and everything is so clean. And like, how is it? I couldn't even grasp it. It looked amazing. But you know what?
yeah,
What's crazy is, as soon as I was excited, as soon as life got started here, when you get to a point where you're comfortable. And we lived in like the hood in Toronto region, like in the worst area. And I remember my friends be like, "Hey, we got to get out of this area." I'm like, "What are you talking about? This is like the safest place I've ever been to. And this is like a rich place." And it hit me like much later on that that place was not a good place to be in.
yeah,
But it's just but when you're coming from a background like that, you don't think about wealth. You think about survival. You don't think about growth. You think about, well, how am I going to make day to day? And that's like programmed into you generationally, in a sense. And doesn't hit people. So the starting point might be is to kind of literally step back and be like, do I even have an awareness around what that looks like? And part of it is kind of logical. Somebody might be listening to this podcast, be like, you know what, it kind of makes sense. But the problem is that you have an emotional program that will always take you back. It's like a rubber band, take you back to what you were. So you're going to struggle, especially with money, even the concept of money. Forget about it, because you will associate your survival with that. And we can go into that. You're going to struggle with even thinking about being wealthy, because you'd be like, I don't deserve this, and I don't know how to do this. But none of that is true. We live, especially anybody who lives in the West, and they don't have a way to create freedom and wealth. And they're telling themselves that no, they don't have opportunities. If you have those thoughts for whatever reason, then you've been programmed to think like that, because that's not true. That literally is not true. You can go out there with zero money and find a way to build a business, find a way to invest, find a way to connect with people, and actually grow your path, grow towards a path that's completely different. But what will stop you is the way you've been trained to think. And that's a starting point, to just recognize that. And you will grab onto any kind of thought pattern that tells you that no, you're just stuck as a victim in that state.
looking to build wealth with real estate? Are you all tapped out on YouTube University and ready to get help tailored to your specific situation and goals? Have you always known that you are a little different from the crowd, that you never liked following the status quo, and that you're just tired of living in mediocrity? You want to build wealth on your own terms outside of Wall Street? Well, then maybe the Microfamily Mavericks mentorship program can help with that. It's a community where I handhold you through the process of buying your first small commercial multifamily building because not everyone is ready for 100 units out the gate. Why multifamily? Because it gives your rental income a hedge against vacancy. Imagine what happens when your single family rental tenant leaves, right? And why commercial 5+ units? Because you have much more control over increasing the building's value in the commercial space and then in turn increasing your own net worth. Starting small is a stepping stone to so much more because then you can tap that equity and buy another building and another and another. And you get the point. So increasing your cash flow and your ability to be job optional along the way. It's all a part of the journey. So if you think big, but you want to start small, and if you know multifamily real estate is the way for you to open the door to building a life of freedom, abundance, and legacy, but you just need someone to guide you step by step, and you want to be surrounded by other people on the same journey, doing the same thing, then just click the link in the show notes to find out a little bit more about the Microfamily Mavericks, and I look forward to potentially seeing you on the inside. So now back to the show.
And there are lots of people who will tell you that that you don't have any power, you're a victim, you come from this place, you will never get to that place, and you will hold on to that. And this is why people buy into that narrative, because it feels so comfortable. But the other side of it is just owning that, you know what, you're a human being with a mind, a very powerful mind, with a heart. Even though you've been programmed one way or another, you can step back and actually start to analyze what's happening. Why is it that in a place that you're in, no matter what you've gone through, whether it be abuse or a bad childhood or whatever it might be, can you use that mind to move forward? It will be hard work for you to reset and do things, but you have to give yourself that permission and ask yourself, what do I really want? And the starting point might be as what matters to me. And just know that you can get pretty much anything that you set your mind on and actually willing to work for, willing to grow towards, and it will not be comfortable. And it's not just hard work. It's about actually questioning where you came from and questioning what are the patterns that stop you from moving forward. And that process is actually very painful. It's a lot easier to go get 5 jobs and go out there and work. I'm not saying that's not hard, but it's a lot harder to kind of face your own challenges internally that stop you from growing. That might be a starting point. So what does that mean? Listen to this podcast and then find some space to ask yourself, what's holding me back right now? Is it the people around me? Is it my own thought process? Is it my own emotions? Likely it's a mix of those. And then ask yourself, what do I really want out of life? Not what other people have and what I should copy, and what do I really want? And this is why I walk people through a process of getting them to become clear about their vision, because most people don't have a vision for their life. They have some goals copied from other people around them because they think, oh, I got to be like my cousin, or got to be like this. That's not going to serve you. But that will be the starting point to step back from your life, ask yourself. And that's what I did, because when I came to Canada first, even though it was an amazing place, but I went into depression because I didn't realize how much of that survival path had built up inside, and I had no time to process, and none of us had any time to process. And then now we're in a space where we feel safe and there's enough, but now we're stuck, or at least I felt stuck. And also it was a completely different culture for me, so I didn't know how to adapt to this new culture. It took me about another 6 years to get out of it, but I went into depression. I got into addiction. I even went towards suicidal stuff. I was getting very close to destroying my life in a place where I shouldn't be doing that. But I had to pull myself out of that and start looking at my life completely differently, putting a pause on everything that I thought I knew, and start analyzing and seeing, why did I do all that stuff? How did I get to that place? And ask myself, where do I need to go? And sometimes at the time I didn't know this, but maybe you need support for that. Maybe you need a coach, maybe you need a mentor, maybe you need somebody outside of your current environment that will help you with that. But that might be a starting point to think about.
Okay. And that was such great information. And honestly, coming from a country where there's war happening, like here in America, we, I guess have been, I can say, been blessed, right? To not actually have war really here, and we see it on TV, and we hear the tragedies, and our hearts go out, and we try to fundraise and whatever we can do to like help bring supplies or things there, but like we have never had to live in that, like besides like we've had like the attack with the towers in New York, and we have, you know, random attacks, and whether that's home based or abroad or whoever. This is not even a political kind of podcast, but that kind of living situation, we can't even imagine living and fearing for your life on a regular basis because of a war that's happening all around you, especially being younger, and then having your parents have enough like audacity and strength and courage to escape that for the sake of their family. Like that's beyond commendable, right? To be able to even experience that and think like, okay, this is more than just me. Now it's the children. We're not safe here. Like we have to do what we can to get out of here and expose our kids to something new. And regardless, when you got here, now it's still like you're right, that conditioning doesn't leave, right? You're still brought up with these deep-seated emotional entranches in your brain, right? That can't just easily be taken out. You don't just get to a new environment and now you're a new person. You have to work on that, and it is painful. And I appreciate you saying that. It's not an easy task to do that and to really look internally and ask yourself those kind of questions. Like from what you've seen, because at this point you've coached a lot of people. You coached people from all different types of walks of life. Like I saw like stay-at-home moms to CEOs to like everything in between. But what is like a super common limiting belief that people have that you've found when you've been coaching these diverse groups of people?
Yeah,
Is there
yeah.
anything that's like underlying that's super common people don't even realize is holding them back?
I, it, you have to really dig deep in these areas to find out, but there are common patterns that people have. And I have right now, most of my work is with entrepreneurs and multifamily investors in US. And you would think that they have gone over all those limiting beliefs, but they haven't. And somehow they've been able to move forward. But I'll like the baseline for pretty much anybody that I've run into, and I haven't had anybody that in the past decade, and I've done thousands of sessions, not one person will be like, no, I don't have this problem. But most people have this challenge of I'm not enough. So you might not even hear that as a thought. Some people do, is like, I'm not enough, I got to get this. And it might even give you an initial motivation to do certain things. But what that does is it constantly keeps you in this loop of trying to compare yourself to other people, trying to do for other people, trying to be pleasing to other people, whether those are people around you, your family or friends or whoever, and not do for them, but do so it pleases them. But you're miserable in the process. And the reason why and you will get into a relationship, you will do the same thing in an intimate relationship. You will do that for your kids. You will do that for the rest of your life. And when I say you, I have done that most of the time, and most of my life. And then you get to a point, you're like, holy shit, I've lived other people's lives. So a couple of years ago, one of our family members passed away from cancer. She was very young, and we went to visit her in Europe. Very smart, very intelligent person. I actually had the chance to spend time with her for a couple of weeks, and she knew why she had cancer. It wasn't even like a question. And actually, she didn't even want to live. As much as she was pretending to tell everybody else that she wanted to live, she didn't, because it was very obvious to me after I had a conversation with her, because she was telling everybody, oh, I'm getting treatments and everything. But deep down, she had already accepted that she was going to go. And the reason for that was very clear. And the reason was that because she had spent the last 40 something years of her life, it wasn't her life. She was living for other people. Not to serve them the way we think of serve and support, but because she was living in the world of obligation, she was living in other people's expectations, she was living other people's lives. It started with parents, then it went towards husband, then it went towards kids, then it went towards. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do stuff. All my life is around my family. I do a lot for my family, but we have this deep seated need for approval. And I've done a lot of training around this. And there's this concept Dr. Gabor Mate talks about. And there's these two powerful needs we have. One is the need for attachment. The other one is the need for authenticity. The need for attachment is incredibly powerful as a young child for human beings. So what does that mean? That means that when we're born, if you watch a child is completely helpless, that child cannot do anything in the first year, can't even move.
Are you enjoying this episode? Then stop what you're doing right now. Head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It really helps our show get pushed to more people who are looking for the information that we're sharing here. We have to share the wealth. If you listen to us on YouTube, make sure you like the episode that you're listening to right now and subscribe to our channel. Then share the channel with somebody else. There are people out there looking for the information you're listening to right now. So make sure you share it with someone who you know needs it. Now, back to the show.
And this is common to mammals, but if you watch it, for example, a horse on the first day can walk around and do a lot of things, even though still dependent. And also as human beings, we're one of the species that our kids are with us the longest in our life. So we're fully dependent on our parents. So there's this biological, very deep-seated need that our parents or family's approval means more than even who we are. So we'll spend our whole childhood trying to seek approval. If you have ever been around kids, or if you have kids, your kids are they're looking for your approval constantly. And their survival depends on it. It's not a conscious process. It's built into their DNA, just like when you get hungry, you need food. It's a need. But we also have another need, the need for authenticity. And this is also built into us. That authenticity is that we need to show up as who we are. Whatever we feel, it needs to get expressed. And that is also linked to our survival. The way that Dr. Gabor Mate explains that is that imagine you're in a small little tribe in the wild a few thousand years ago, and all of a sudden you feel this fear, this instinct that something is dangerous. You need to be able to express that. If you cannot express that, there's a wild animal that's going to get you. But the problem is that in the current world, that need gets suppressed more and more because we don't have those instincts around survival and all that stuff. We don't have wild animals or anything. So it becomes less and less important. So what ends up happening is that authenticity to express our emotions, express who we are, gets suppressed slowly for the need for attachment. And then we transfer that same thing to our tribe, to our group, and we spend our whole life trying to get approval from other people. Am I okay? Am I good enough? Am I good looking enough? Am I intelligent enough? Am I human enough? Or am I whatever enough? And then we get to a point where, like, you know what, I've lived somebody else's life. And that's like built into every person that I've seen, including me. And I've had to work on that process to not operate based on that. And it's very powerful. It's very strong. And in the moment you won't think about it, it's just an emotional drive. That's underneath. And so how does that show up? If you notice yourself, you're doing a bunch of stuff for somebody else, some obligation, expectation, and you're telling yourself that I don't have any other choice, you've fallen into that trap, because that's not true. If you actually use your mind, if you think consciously and creatively, you will find that you have multiple different choices. You're making a choice, maybe a very difficult choice, but you're making a choice. There's always, and that's the hallmark of being human, that we have the ability to make choices. But we always say this phrase, I don't have a choice. We say it because it's too painful to make a different choice.
So let me actually interject a question really quick there. When I understand you do have a choice and you have to have boundaries and do what is best for you and not live in somebody else's life or what someone else's expectations of you are. I try very hard not to do that. And a lot of times people will, or even people close to me will label me as selfish because of those boundaries, right? Like they confuse like self-care with being selfish because you're not just bending and doing anything for anybody at any given time, right? And I truly don't believe, because I have a lot of caring and I do a lot of things that are outside of what I really want to do to help other people. So or I think, and maybe they don't know that I'm thinking of all the different scenarios and trying to figure out the best one that is not too intrusive on what they need to do, but it also still serves what I need to do, but still comes off as like selfish. So when you are trying to instill these boundaries, and it is people or a person who you care about, and you can't just say to the wind, oh well, people go in and out of your life. So what if this is family that is important to you and you don't want to ruin the relationship, right? How do you balance that fine line between asserting your own needs and your self-care and your what you need to do, but also still not giving into the expectations, but having, I don't know, you know what I'm trying to say here, but trying to have that balance between fulfilling what other people expect and fulfilling what you need as for time and mental capacity and sanity and all of that kind of stuff. How do you do that without really ruining the relationship and telling somebody to go kick rocks?
Yeah, I understand. So this is why I alluded to the vision piece. When you and this is the part that most people won't take the time to sit down and do this. And by the way, if anybody wants, if they don't know how to come up with their vision, and a vision is not a vision board that a lot of people understand in the personal development, where you slap a bunch of pictures and put it on it. You actually have to do the deeper work of understanding what matters to you. And there's a whole process you need to go through. I take my clients every year about 2-3 times through it, and they spend hours on it and days on it to refine what they really want and what matters to them, and then they build a strategic plan around that. And so why is it important to understand what you truly want? And when you actually do the vision process, not just a lot, it's actually an emotional process. Uh, I take my clients towards what really matters to them. And you might want all sorts of weird things like, oh, I want a car, I want a house. That's not what happens in a vision. I want you to think more specifically around who you want to become as a person. What kind of person do you see yourself? What is an ideal version of yourself? Everybody has that aspiration. So if you're listening to this, ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? If you don't know what that is, who inspires you in your life? And some people will say, like, if they're a Christian, be like, I want to be like Jesus. Okay, what about Jesus inspires you? What is it? Is it compassion? Is it connection? Is it what is it love? What is it? Or it might be Warren Buffett. It might be a specific business owner. What is it about that person? And I want you to look for that ideal version of yourself that you're seeking. And that is going to be your anchor towards what you want. And a lot of people try to set boundaries without understanding what they really want, because boundaries are like, these are so imagine US, for example. US has a constitution, right? US started because the founders of the country, they had a vision for a new world. They started because they had a vision for a new world. There were values around that. There was a whole constitution around that. They set that up, and it has evolved, but it started with something, and that has carried it forward. So why does US, America, it has boundaries? Because it had a vision for a land. It had a vision for a path forward. It had a vision for opportunity for people, for freedom for people, lots of things like that. Had a lot of problems too, but that's, everything has it. But the key there is, when you understand what you truly want deep down, then it becomes much simpler to create a boundary around what matters to you. And that boundary is not just, oh, I'm just putting boundaries around me. That boundaries around, you know what, the thing that I'm working on is not just important right now, it's also important for my future self, for my family, for my community, for the business that I'm in. And if you haven't done that work, it becomes very, very hard to say no to people. So how does that look like practically? So, for example, I'll go back to my story. A few years ago, when I jumped into entrepreneurship, I had studied mechanical engineering, and I just finished, and I worked in the field for a couple of years. Now, you can imagine my parents are proud. and I'm doing the work that I'm doing. I had just gotten married, and then all of a sudden I go nuts, and I'd be like, I'm quitting all that. quitting all that. I'm gonna start a business, and I'm gonna be this coach. And they're like, what? What is that? It's like, oh, people are gonna pay me to talk to them. It's like, are you nuts? You just studied this whole thing. You're gonna do this, and you can imagine the reaction people would have in that path. And not only that, we were in debt at the time, and I'm like, I'm trying this new thing it's an online thing that nobody understands around me. And I jump in, and you could imagine that everybody thought we were crazy, both my wife and I. And there were a few people that even though they didn't understand, they accepted what we did. But most people are like, "You guys are nuts," and we thought we were nuts, to be honest. Like we didn't know what we were doing. And so you could imagine how hard it would be to create boundaries around that, and constantly hearing that that's not going to work. Why would you sacrifice this whole thing, 5+ years of going to college and doing this thing for this thing that you don't even know if it will work out or not? If you work for a couple of years, you're going to be in six figure, and that's but I knew I didn't want that, because I realized that no matter how much they paid me, I'll still be on that rat race, and I did not want that. I wanted a life where I was growing, I was making a difference, I was creating an impact. And my wife and I had worked on our vision so much that, you know what, no matter how painful it gets, no matter how difficult it gets, we're going to go on our own path. So what did that look like? I literally quit my path on the other side. I'm not suggesting to anybody do that, but that's what happened for me. I started driving Uber at the time. And this was the beginnings of Uber too, which was a huge opportunity for me because it gave me the freedom to do my own, run my business too. And at that time, I started studying everything that I needed to know about business, about coaching. It was a new path for me, completely new. And I wasn't making any headways the first couple of years, but I was staying on track. Now imagine I'm driving Uber constantly. I'm the sole breadwinner. My wife is with my first daughter. And afterwards, I still have to spend time learning and building the business. I have very little time. And you constantly hear, "Where are you? You're never there for this. You're never there for that." I needed to learn how to do that. In the beginning, it wasn't easy. But the initial point was that I was very clear about the kind of person I wanted to become. I was very clear about the path I wanted to create. And it wasn't just for me. Your vision is not just for you. It was for me, for my family, for even the people that didn't look at it as a positive thing. It was for them too. It was for my nephews, my nieces, my kids. I wanted to give them a different model, so it meant a lot to me. And so when I would sit there, and and then slowly it taught me to create a structure for my time, for my day. I would look at my calendar. You know what? This is difficult right now. For this year, next year, it's gonna get easier. Right now, whatever comes towards me, I'll have to deal with it. So I simply had to say no without too many reasons, without too many explanations. And sometimes I did give explanations. I would say that this is really important to me. I know you can't understand this. I don't even know how to communicate it. But over time, what I had to learn was better ways of communicating and understanding other people. I didn't have that in the beginning. Initially, I had to figure out what my vision was, what I wanted. I had to create some kind of structure around my time, knowing that this is truly important for me, for my family, for those around me, long term. And I knew that there's going to be resistance, pain internally from me and from other people. Over time, I had to develop the skill set to help people understand what I was doing, why I was doing those. And I slowly developed the ability to communicate better, ask better questions, help people know that what I'm doing is not just a selfish thing. This is important. It matters. And I didn't break any relationships. There are some relationships I broke on purpose because I knew they were going to be destructive, but I've kept my relationships with my family and friends, and I've moved forward because I had an internal belief that no matter what, people who care about you will stay with you. People who want you to be a certain way because they only can see you that way, they will move on, and that's okay. But in the process, what I did was I grew as a person, and I learned skills like communication, which meant that I learned how to communicate things better. I learned how to understand other people better. I learned to help them see that this path not only serves me, but other people as well. And in the moment, I was okay with the discomfort and that other people might not understand it. And again, that requires a certain amount of awareness and being okay with those uncomfortable emotions. And the path to freedom is not an easy path. It's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be painful, but you just need to be okay with that process in the short term so you can gain something long term better. Again, I'm just explaining a process that I actually walk people through. They have to build out their vision, they have to build out the structure, they have to constantly battle with the fact that other people might not understand the thing. They have to develop the tools and the skill sets to communicate things better. That is a process you need to work on. But once you start to do that, you will start to see that people who care about you and they want you to succeed, they will, even if they don't understand it, they will accept it. And they will wait and watch. And then they will see what's happening in the first couple of years. Not much happens. And then after that, you start to make progress. And after that, they see the results. They start to see that, oh, this person is doing this stuff. This person is doing that stuff. Now, and I'll fast forward and I'll share this. In the beginning, my biggest critic was actually my mom. And it was very painful for me to hear that. Now she's my biggest supporter. If you ever go on any of my social media, she'll be the first one. I'm proud of you. I'm that. And I knew that she was, and it was painful for me to hear at the time, but I knew that she wasn't doing it out of a space of hurting me. She was doing it from a place of care, but she just didn't know. It wasn't helpful, and I've told her that it wasn't helpful what you were doing, but she understood a little bit. I was there because she was trying to protect me as a mom. But
Yeah.
once she saw that I'm making progress, it completely changed. Now she's proud of me. She sees what I'm trying to do, even though she doesn't, even to this day, she doesn't understand half the things that I'm doing, but she's accepted that I'm just weird and different.
No, definitely. That was exactly what I was going to say is that most of the time when people are telling us to stop or giving us advice, unsolicited or not, is coming from a place of concern and not necessarily any kind of malice or they're trying to tear you down. Just they're concerned for safety because they're basing their advice off of what they know and what their framework is. And you have to find people, and you mentioned this before about like finding a different circle or finding other people, but that's very important to find people who are doing what you want to do or are in that kind of world so then they understand a little bit better. You can get insight from someone who has a different type of framework. One other thing that spawned from your talking about building out and how the first couple of years are really difficult as entrepreneurs, and I'm experiencing that myself. Those first few years are difficult until you really start getting traction. Sometimes you get some traction and you still feel like you're grinding and it's not enough traction to really let you put your foot off the pedal a little bit. But when you have younger children, so you're a girl dad, right? I don't know if your third is a girl or boy, if you know, or if you're announced it
I don't
yet.
know if I can say that out loud, but
Okay,
oh, I
you
don't
can
think
keep
my
it.
friend. There's one group of people that we need to surprise for it, but I don't think they'll be listening to this. So that will be we're gonna let them know soon. So the third one will be a boy.
Oh, nice. Well, you don't have the boy dad experience yet, so I'll go with girl dad for now. You have girl dad experience, and I'm a girl mom. Um, and just having young kids and building out your business and your vision and starting that few years of like hard grinding, you're working Uber during the day, you're coming home and you're learning about business and entrepreneurship and all that stuff at night, and you really don't have time. And I can see, especially time to like maybe go to birthday parties or go to, whatever else is happening, even just like in your families and friends circle. But how have you handled, or how do you suggest people handle balancing building a business and being in that early stage of the journey with still being present for your immediate family, especially when you have young kids? And I always struggle with the idea of the time they're not going to be young forever, but you also don't want to wait to start building. Like I want to build so that when they get like close to 10 and they still kind of are in that stage where they still want mommy or daddy around, that now I'm free and I have the freedom to be around and to be there for all their activities and do all, and I'm not stuck at work because now I've worked for that freedom, but I did that during their early growth stages. You know what I'm saying? I know there's a lot of people out there who are struggling with that idea of like building their business versus the time with their young kids. And so I'm doing the best I can with blending both of those, but just want to hear your viewpoint on that and what you did to kind of balance that and still be around, and what you advise your clients to do.